Waystation Helix 9 floated in the darkness between stars like a city made of metal and light. Thousands of beings from dozens of worlds lived there, traded there and passed through on their way to somewhere else. It was not a beautiful place. The walls were old and stained with decades of use. The air recyclers hummed day and night, and the corridors smelled of engine oil and alien spices, but it was alive, and for many it was home. Mary's Talveth arrived on a transport ship with 2 bags and a heart full of hope. She was Valoran, tall and slender, with pale violet skin and eyes that held flecks of silver like scattered stars. Her people were known for their love of knowledge and their calm, thoughtful nature. Nuris had spent 6 years studying humans. She found them fascinating. They were so young, compared to most species in the galaxy. Yet they had spread across the stars with a speed that made older races nervous. She wanted to understand them, to write about how they lived among aliens, and to share that knowledge with her world. But when she checked her account at the station's banking terminal, her stomach dropped. Her research grant had been canceled. The funding was gone. A message from her university explained that budget cuts had ended her project. She stood in the busy corridor, staring at the screen, feeling the world collapse around her. Without funding, she could not pay for housing. Without housing, she would be sent back to Valoria on the next available ship. Her research, her dreams, her years of work, all of it would vanish like smoke. She sat in a small cafe for hours, drinking bitter tea and trying to think of a solution. That was when she overheard 2 human women talking at the next table. One of them mentioned something about residential rights. Nares listened carefully. According to galactic law, anyone married to a permanent station worker could stay on the station indefinitely. It was an old rule meant to keep families together, but it was still valid. Nares felt a spark of hope. If she could find someone willing to marry her just on paper, just for legal purposes, she could stay and continue her work. It was not romantic, but it was practical. Her people valued practical solutions. She spent the next 3 days searching. She asked around, made inquiries, and met several humans who seemed interested, but wanted things she was not willing to give. She was about to lose hope when a dock worker named Greg pointed her toward the lower maintenance decks. "There's a guy down there," Greg said, wiping grease from his hands. "Name's Eli Vance. Keeps to himself, never causes trouble. Been here for years, fixing engines and life support systems. Doesn't talk much, but he's a good man. Might help you out if you ask nicely." In made her way down to the maintenance levels. The corridors there are narrower and darker. The hum of machinery was louder and fewer people walked the halls. She found Ella in a workshop filled with tools and spare parts. He was kneeling beside a broken air filtration unit, his hands deep inside its metal guts. He was not what she expected. He was average height for a human, with broad shoulders and arms that showed years of physical work. His hair was dark brown, cut short and practical. His face was calm and weathered, like a man who had seen many things and chosen to forget most of them. He looked up when she entered, and his eyes met hers. They were gray, quiet, and deep. "Can I help you?" he asked. His voice was low and soft, like he was not used to speaking. Mary's explained her situation. She told him about her research, about losing her funding, and about the marriage provision in galactic law. She promised it would be a simple arrangement. She would not bother him or interfere with his life. She just needed the legal status to stay. Eli listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay, he said. Nerys blinked. Okay, just like that. You don't want anything in return? He shook his head and went back to working on the filtration unit. You need help? I can help. That's enough. They married 2 days later in a small civil office on the station's administrative level. Board official read the words. They signed the documents, and it was done. Nerys moved her 2 bags into Eli's quarters that evening. His home was small but clean. There was a narrow bed, a tiny kitchen area, a table with 2 chairs, and shelves lined with old paper. Books, real books, the kind humans used to make on Earth before they reached the stars. In one corner, a small hydroponic garden grew tomatoes and herbs under artificial light. The air smelled faintly of green things and machine oil. Eli gave her the bed and slept on a mat on the floor without complaint. He woke early each morning, made simple food, and left for his work in the maintenance decks. He returned in the evening, read his books, tended his plants, and said very little. At first Nerys found the silence uncomfortable. The Lorians loved conversation and debate, but slowly she began to appreciate the peace. AI never demanded anything from her. He never asked about her work or her plans. He simply existed beside her, quiet and steady like a stone in a river. She began to notice small things about him, the way other humans looked at him when they passed in the corridors, not with fear but with something like respect. The old scars on his hands and arms, faded white lines that spoke of violence long past. The way he moved, always aware of his surroundings, always balanced and ready. One night, as they ate dinner together in comfortable silence, Nuri asked him about his past. What did you do before you came here? She said. Eli looked at her for a moment. His gray eyes were unreadable. I fixed things, he said. Same as now. She knew he was not telling the whole truth, but she did not push. Everyone had secrets. She had married a stranger, and strangers were allowed their mysteries. Still, as the weeks passed and she watched him move through his quiet life, Nerys could not shake the feeling that there was something hidden beneath his calm surface, something vast and deep, like an ocean hiding beneath a thin layer of ice. She told herself it did not matter. He was kind to her. He gave her a place to stay and asked for nothing. That was enough. But late at night, when the station lights dimmed and the corridors fell silent, she sometimes caught him sitting alone by the window, staring out at the stars with eyes full of old sorrow, and she wondered what ghosts lived inside the quiet human she had married. 2 months passed on Way Station Helix 9, and Nurse slowly settled into her new life. She spent her days in the station's public areas, watching humans interact with the many alien species that lived and worked there. She took notes, recorded conversations, and gathered material for her research. In the evenings, she returned to the small quarters she shared with Eli. Living with him was easier than she had expected. He asked nothing of her and demanded nothing from their arrangement. He cooked simple meals, rice and vegetable soups made from the tomatoes in his garden. Bread he baked himself in the tiny oven. The food was plain but good, made with care and patience. Nerys found herself looking forward to those quiet dinners. They rarely spoke, but the silence between them was not empty. It was comfortable, like sitting beside a warm fire on a cold night. She learned his routines. He woke before the station lights brightened to simulate morning. He exercised in the small space beside his bed, push-up stretches, movements that looked almost like a dance. Then he showered, dressed in his work clothes, and left. He returned 12 hours later, sometimes covered in grease, sometimes smelling of coolant or electrical smoke. He never complained about the long hours or the hard work. On his days off, he read. His collection of paper books was impressive. Old Earth novels, philosophy, poetry, history. She watched him turn the yellowed pages with careful fingers, completely absorbed. Words written centuries ago. Once she asked him why he preferred paper books to digital ones. He thought for a moment before answering. Digital words can be erased, he said. Paper lasts. There's something honest about that. It was one of the longest sentences she had heard him speak. Nar also noticed that Eli never talked about himself. She knew nothing about where he came from, what he had done before arriving at the station, or why he had chosen to live such a solitary life. When she asked questions, he gave short answers that revealed nothing. She stopped asking. After a while, it felt rude to keep pushing, but she could not stop being curious. The mystery of him knotted at her mind like a puzzle she could not solve. One evening, everything changed. Nerys had gone to the market district to buy supplies. The market was a loud, colorful place where vendors from a dozen worlds sold food, clothing, and technology. She loved walking through it, watching the flow of beings from so many different cultures. She was examining a piece of Valoran fabric when she heard rough voices behind her. She turned and saw 3 Kree mercenaries blocking her path. The Krath were large, reptilian beings with thick scales and cruel eyes. They worked as hired soldiers throughout the galaxy, and they had a reputation for violence. Pretty little thing, one of them said, showing his sharp teeth in what might have been a smile. Valorium, yes, you're kind. Thinks too much. Maybe we teach you to think less. Mary stepped back, her heart pounding. The market was crowded, but no one moved to help her. People looked away, not wanting to get involved. With arm breath, please let me pass, she said, keeping her voice calm. The lead craft laughed and reached for her arm. We don't take orders from. He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes shifted to something behind Nerys, and his expression changed. The other 2 craft saw it too. Their mocking grins faded, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Nerys turned and saw Ella standing a few meters away. He had not made a sound. He simply stood there, still and silent, his gray eyes fixed on the crest. He was not armed. He was not even wearing work clothes, just simple pants and a plain shirt. He looked like exactly what he claimed to be, a maintenance worker, an ordinary man. But something about him had changed. The air around him felt heavy, charged with the tension Nerys could not explain. He did not speak. He did not move. He just watched. The lead craft released Nerys' arm and took a step back. We want no trouble, he muttered. Eli said nothing. He did not need to. The 3 mercenaries turned and walked away, quickly disappearing into the crowd. The other shoppers began to move again, the moment passing as if it had never happened. Eli walked to Nerys and looked at her with quiet concern. Are you Hurt? He asked. She shook her head, still trying to understand what had just happened. No, I'm fine, but how did you do that? They were armed, you just she stopped, realizing she did not know how to finish that sentence. Eli's expression did not change. Let's go home, he said. They walked back to their quarters in silence. Nerys kept glancing at him, searching for some sign of what she had witnessed. But he looked the same as always, calm, quiet, unremarkable. That night she lay awake in bed thinking. The Kreth were dangerous killers who feared nothing. They had faced Eli and unarmed Makeg, and they had been afraid. Not just cautious, truly afraid. They had recognized something in him, something that Nerys could not see. She remembered the scars on his hands. She remembered the way he moved, always balanced, always aware. She remembered the old sorrow in his eyes when he looked at the stars. Who was this man she had married? The next morning she watched him make breakfast as usual. He moved through the small kitchen with the same quiet efficiency, slicing vegetables and stirring a pot of soup. Nothing about him seemed different from any other day. Eli, she said carefully, those Kreth last night, they knew you, or they knew something about you. What did they see? He was silent for a long moment, then he set down his knife and looked at her. They saw a human, he said simply. That's not an answer, it's the only answer I have. She wanted to argue, to push harder, but something in his eyes made her stop. There was pain there, buried deep beneath the calm surface. Whatever secrets he carried, they were heavy ones. I won't ask again, she said quietly, but I want you to know whatever you're hiding, it doesn't change anything. You've been kind to me, that's what matters. Eli looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression. Gratitude perhaps, or relief. Thank you, he said. He returned to cooking, and Nerys returned to her thoughts. She had promised not to ask again, but she had not promised to stop looking. The mystery of Eli Vance had taken root in her mind, and she knew she would not rest until she understood the truth. Somewhere in his past there was a story that made hardened killers back away in fear, a story written in scars and silence and sorrow. And Nerys was determined to find it. Nerys began her search quietly. She did not want Eli to know she was digging into his past. It felt like a betrayal of his trust, but she could not stop herself. The question burned inside her. Who was the silent man she had married? She started with the station's historical archives. As a researcher, she had access to public records and academic databases. She spent hours reading about humans, their history, their wars, their rapid expansion across the galaxy. The more she read, the more she understood why other species both admired and feared them. Humans had arrived on the galactic stage only 2 centuries ago. In that short time they had fought 3 major wars, established colonies on hundreds of worlds, and earned a reputation as the most stubborn, unpredictable, and dangerous species in known space. They were not the strongest or the fastest or the smartest, but they never gave up. They never stopped fighting, and they never forgot a wrong done to them. The galaxy had learned to respect humans. Some had learned to fear them. Nerys focused her research on the Great Expansion War, fought 30 years ago between the Human Alliance and the Drath Collective. The Drath were an ancient empire of insect-like beings who believed a species existed only to serve them. When humans refused to kneel, the Drath Attacked, the war had been brutal. Millions died on both sides, entire worlds burned for 5 terrible years. The outcome hung in the balance, then. Slowly the humans pushed back. They fought with a ferocity that shocked even their allies. They won battles they should have lost, held positions they should have abandoned, and refused to accept defeat even when defeat seemed certain. One battle stood out in all the records, the Battle of the Carrax Line. Nerys read the accounts with growing fascination. The Carrax Line was a narrow passage through an asteroid field, the only safe route between two star systems. During the war it became a critical escape path for human refugees fleeing the Drath advance fleet of civilian ships carrying women, children, and elder needed to pass through the line to reach safety, but the Drath knew about the evacuation. They sent a massive force to intercept the refugees. 40 warships, thousands of soldiers. The human navy was too far away to help. The civilians would be slaughtered. Then something impossible happened. A single human soldier held the narrowest point of the passage. For 72 hours he fought alone against wave after wave of Drath attackers. He used the asteroids as cover, turned the tight space into a killing ground, and refused to let a single enemy ship pass. By the time reinforcements arrived, the refugees had escaped. The Drath force had been broken. The soldier was never officially identified. Military records listed him only by his call sign, the Ghost. Mary stared at the screen, her heart beating fast. She searched for more details and found fragments of footage from the battle recorded by the sensors of distant ships, blurry and incomplete. She watched a figure in battered armor moving through smoke and debris, firing, dodging, never stopping. The footage was too unclear to show his face, but there was one moment when the camera caught his left hand gripping a weapon. She froze the image and enhanced it. There, on the back of his hand, was a burned scar, long and ragged, shaped like a crescent moon. Nerys felt cold. She had seen that scar before. She saw it every morning when Eli made breakfast, every evening when he tended his garden. It was the same scar in the same place. She sat in silence for a long time, trying to process what she had discovered. The quiet mechanic who slept on the floor so she could have the bed, the kind man who cooked simple meals and read old books. He was the ghost of Thermopylae, the legendary soldier who had single-handedly saved thousands of lives and turned the tide of a war. That night she returned to their quarters with her mind full of questions. AI was sitting by the window reading a book of poetry. He looked up when she entered and gave her a small nod of greeting. Mary sat down across from him. Her hands were shaking. I found something today, she said, in the archives about the war. Eli's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. Shadow of old pain. I read about the Battle of the Carrax Line, she continued, about the soldier who held the passage alone. They called him the Ghost. Silence stretched between them. The hum of the station system seemed very loud. I saw footage, Nurse said softly. There was a scar on his hand, burn mark shaped like a crescent. She looked at Ella's left hand resting on his book. The scar was clearly visible. Eli followed her gaze. For a moment he was perfectly still. Then he closed his book and set it aside. That was a long time ago, he said. His voice was quiet. Tired. You held that line alone for 3 Days, you saved thousands of people. You're a hero, Eli shook his head. Slowly, I'm not a hero, I was just a soldier doing his job. The real heroes were the people who had the courage to flee, to protect their children, to keep living even when everything was falling apart. He paused. I just killed, that's all I was good at, but you saved them. I saved them by killing others. There's no glory in that, only necessity. He looked at her with those gray eyes full of depth and sorrow. I spent 5 years watching friends die. I did things that still wake me up at night. When the war ended, I wanted to disappear, to become no one, to find some quiet place where I could just exist without the weight of what I'd done. Nerys felt tears forming in her eyes. She had expected pride, maybe reluctance. She had not expected this deep, weary grief. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. Because the ghost is dead, Eli said simply. He died at the Carrick's line along with the man I used to be. I'm just Eli now, a mechanic. Someone who fixes things instead of breaking them. He met her eyes. I didn't want you to look at me the way you're looking at me now. How am I looking at you? Like I'm something more than human. Like I'm a legend. He smiled sadly. I'm not. I'm just tired. Nerys, tired of being seen as a weapon instead of a person. She reached across the space between them and took his scarred hand in hers. He flinched slightly at the contact but did not pull away. I don't see a weapon, she said. I see a man who gave me a home when I had nothing. A man who cooks soup and grows tomatoes and reads poetry. That's who you are now. That's who I married. Eli looked at their joined hands for a long moment. When he looked up, there was something new in his eyes, hope perhaps, or at the beginning of peace. Thank you, he said. Quietly, they sat together in silence as the station lights dimmed toward night. Outside the window, the stars burned, cold and distant, and somewhere in the darkness between them, the ghost of Thermopylae finally began to rest. For a few weeks after Nuri learned the truth, life continued as before. Eli still worked in the maintenance decks. Mary still conducted her research. They still shared quiet dinners and comfortable silences, but something had changed between them. There was a new warmth, a deeper understanding. Nar found herself caring for this quiet man in ways she had not expected. She kept his secret. She told no one she had discovered. It was his story to share or hide as he chose. Then the draft ship arrived. It came through the station's transit gate without warning, a massive warship bristling with weapons painted in the dark colors of the Drath Collective, the station's defense grid. Powered up automatically, but everyone knew it would be useless against such a vessel. One warship could destroy Helix 9 in minutes. Panic spread through the corridors. People rushed to gather their belongings, to find their families, to reach the escape pods, but there was nowhere to go. The draft ship blocked the only exit. Nerys was in the market district when the alarm started. She pushed through the frightened crowds and made her way back to the maintenance levels, desperately searching for Eli. She found him in his workshop, calmly putting away his tools as if nothing unusual was happening. Eli, there's a Drath warship, she said breathlessly. We have to. I know. His voice was steady. I've been expecting this. Before she could ask what he meant, the station's communication system crackled to life. Harsh clicking voice filled every corridor and room. Attention, inhabitants of Way Station Helix 9. I am Commander Rithus of the Drath Collective. I am searching for a human. Criminal who hides among you, he's known by the name the Ghost, 30 years ago. This human murdered my father at the Carrick's Line. I have spent decades hunting him. I know he's here. The voice paused. Nerys felt ice in her stomach. You have 6 hours to surrender the Ghost to me. If you do not, I will destroy this station and everyone on it. This is not a negotiation. This is justice. The transmission ended. Silence filled the station, broken only by the distant sound of crying in prayer. Nerys turned to Eli. He was standing very still, his eyes closed. They found you, she whispered. Yes, he opened his eyes. Vreek, this. I remember his father, a general, one of the commanders at Carrick. I killed him on the second day of the battle. He was leading a boarding party, trying to break through my position. His voice was flat, emotionless. I didn't know he had a son. What are we going to do? We aren't going to do anything. All I reached for a small bag and began filling it with a few items. Photograph, a folded piece of paper, warm metal token. I'm going to go to him. What? No. Nerys grabbed his arm. You can't just surrender yourself. He'll kill you probably. Eli looked at her with calm acceptance. But if I don't go, he'll kill everyone on this station. Thousands of innocent people. I won't let that happen. There has to be another way. We can contact the Human Alliance. Call for help. There's no time, and even if help came, people would die in the fighting. He gently removed her hand from his arm. This is my fight, Nerys. My past. I won't let others pay the price for it. She felt tears streaming down her face. I just found you. I just started to understand you. You can't leave now. Eli reached out and touched her cheek, wiping away a tear. It was the most intimate gesture he had ever made. I spent 30 years running from who I was, he said softly, hiding in the quiet places, pretending to be nobody. But you can't outrun the past forever. It always catches up. He smiled, a real smile, warm and sad. Meeting you was the best thing that happened to me since the war. You saw me as a person, not a legend. That meant more than you'll ever know. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead gently. Stay here, he said. Please. Whatever happens, don't follow me. Then he picked up his bag and walked out the door. Nurse stood frozen for only a moment. Then she ran after him. She followed him through the station's corridors, staying far enough back that he wouldn't notice. Around them, people huddled in groups, whispering fearfully. Some recognized Eli and stared with wide eyes. Word was spreading. Someone had figured out the truth. By the time Eli reached the main docking bay, a crowd had gathered. Station security was there, along with the station administrator, a nervous Corvian with trembling antenna. You can't do this, the administrator said. We can negotiate, find another solution. There is no other solution, Eli replied calmly. Open the airlock. I'm going to their ship alone, unarmed. Yes. The crowd parted as Eli walked toward the airlock. Nerys pushed through the bodies until she reached the front. Eli, she called out. He turned. When he saw her, something flickered across his face. Love, perhaps a regret. I told you to stay, he said. I never promised I would listen. She walked to him, ignoring the stares of everyone around them. If you're going to do this, at least tell me why. The real reason. Eli was quiet for a moment, then he spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. 30 years ago, I held a line so that innocent people could escape. I did terrible things to make that possible. I killed hundreds. I watched friends die. I became something less than human so that others could remain human. He paused. I've spent 3 decades trying to find myself again, trying to remember what it means to live, not just survive. He looked at Nuris and his eyes were clear. Now there are innocent people in danger again, thousands of them, and once again, I'm the only one who can stand between them and death. He smiled slightly. Maybe this is who I am. Maybe this is all I was ever meant to be. The man who stands in the gap. He turned back toward the airlock, opened the door. He said. The security officer hesitated, then complied. The massive metal doors slid apart, revealing the long docking tube that led to the Drath warship. AI walked for without looking back. His footsteps echoed in the silence. The crowd watched, barely breathing. Nuris watched the man she loved walk toward almost certain death, and she prayed to God. She barely believed in that somehow, some way he would come back to her. Airlock door closed behind him with a sound like a tomb sealing shut, and Eli Vance, the ghost of the man who had refused to die, walked alone into the darkness to face his past one final time. The inside of the Drath warship was dark and cold. The air smelled of metal and something else, something ancient and bitter, like old hatred. Ally walked through the corridors alone, his footsteps the only sound in the silence. Drath soldiers lined the walls, watching him pass. They were tall insect creatures with hard shells and multiple limbs, each one carrying weapons that could tear a human apart in seconds. But none of them moved to stop him. None of them even raised their weapons. They knew who he was. Word had spread from the station. The ghost was walking among them. Eli felt their fear like a physical thing. It surrounded him, pressed against him from all sides. These were hardened warriors who had fought in dozens of battles, and they were afraid of one unarmed human. He did not feel proud. He felt only sadness. The corridors led him deeper into the ship toward the command center. Along the way, he passed trophies mounted on the walls, weapons taken from defeated enemies, flags from conquered worlds. He recognized some of them, human flags, human weapons, reminders of battles fought long ago. Finally, he reached the command chamber. Commander Vrathis stood, waiting for him. The draft commander was larger than the others, his shell darker and scarred from countless fights, his eyes black and compound like a spider's, fixed on Eli with burning hatred. In one clawed hand, he held a ceremonial blade, its edge gleaming in the dim light. So, Breaktha said, his voice clicking and harsh. The ghost reveals himself at last. Do you know how long I have searched for you? I can guess, Eli replied calmly. 30 years, 30 years. Hunting rumors and whispers. 30 years following the trail of a man who should have died 100 times over. Reckless, the step closer, his mandibles twitching with rage. My father was a great warrior, a hero of the collective. You killed him like an animal in that cursed passage. Your father was leading an assault on unarmed civilians, Eli said. Women, children, old people fleeing for their lives. He would have slaughtered them all if I hadn't stopped him. They were enemies. In war there are no innocents. That's where you're wrong. Eli's voice was quiet but firm. That's always where your kind has been wrong, and that's why you lost. Break. This let out a sound like breaking glass. Strath laughter, cold and cruel. Lost. Look around you, human. I have a warship, you have nothing. You walked in here alone, unarmed, ready to die. Where's your victory now? AI was silent for a moment, then he spoke. Do you know why I came alone? Vrathis tilted his head, curious despite his anger. I could have fought. Eli continued. I've spent 30 years pretending to be weak, but I haven't forgotten how to kill. I could have armed myself, gathered weapons, made your soldiers pay for every inch of this ship in blood. I've done it before. I could do it again. He met the commander's eyes without fear. But I'm tired of killing. I'm tired of being the ghost. I came here not to fight you, but to ask you a question. What question? What happens after you kill me? Eli asked. Will it bring your father back? Will it fill the emptiness you've carried for 30 years? Will it make you happy? Break this hesitated. I've killed more beings than I can count. Eli said. I've watched them die. Drath human others, and I can tell you something I learned in all that death. Revenge doesn't heal anything, it just creates more emptiness, more pain. Ghosts haunting people who could have chosen to live instead. He stepped closer to Rikus, close enough to touch. Your father made his choice. He chose war, chose to attack defenseless people. He died because of that choice. You can hate me for being the one who stopped him. You can kill me right here, right now, but it won't change anything. You'll still be empty. You'll still wake up at night wondering what the point of it all was. Refuse raised the ceremonial blade, his arm trembling. You don't understand, he hissed. You can't understand. He was my father, my blood. I understand better than you think. Ali's voice was soft now, gentle. I lost people too, brothers in arms, friends who died in my hands while I couldn't do anything to save them. I spent years hating the Drath for taking them from me. I dreamed of revenge, of making your kind pay for every drop of human blood. He paused, but then I realized that if I gave myself to hate, I would become no better than the ones who hurt me. I would be just another monster, adding to the suffering instead of ending it. He looked at Vrathis with something like compassion. You have a choice, Commander, right here, right now. You can keep being a prisoner of your father's death, or you can let it go and become something more than your grief. The command chamber was silent. The giraffe soldiers watched motionless. Even the hum of the ship's engine seemed to fade. Rake stared at Eli for a long, endless moment. The blade shook in his hand. His eyes were unreadable. Then slowly he lowered the weapon. You are strange creatures, he said quietly. You humans, you fight like demons and speak like priests. You show mercy to your enemies and death to your friends. I do not understand you. We don't always understand ourselves, Eli admitted. Refuse was silent for another long moment, then he turned away. Go, he said. Take your station and your people. I will not attack, not today and tomorrow. Tomorrow I do not. No, the commander's voice was tired. Now old. Perhaps I will find something else to live for, perhaps not, but today I choose to let the past die. Eli nodded. That's all any of us can do. He walked back through the ship, past the silent soldiers, through the dark corridors and out into the docking tube. When he emerged into the station's airlock, the crowd was still there, waiting in terrified silence. He stepped through the door. For a moment no one moved, then a cheer erupted, a wave of sound that shook the entire docking bay. People rushed forward, crying, laughing, reaching out to touch him like he was something sacred. But Eli looked past them all, searching for only one face. He found Nuri standing at the edge of the crowd, tears streaming down her violet cheeks. He walked toward her and the crowd parted to let him pass. When he reached her, she threw her arms around him and held on like she would never let go. I thought I lost you, she whispered. I thought I lost myself, he replied, a long time ago, but you helped me find my way back. They stood there together as the Drath warship powered up its engines and withdrew from the station. The crowd cheered again, but Eli barely heard them. All he heard was Nuri's heartbeat against his chest, steady and strong. Later that night, they sat in their small quarters, side by side. The station was celebrating, but they had chosen to be alone. Eli's garden glowed green under the artificial lights outside the window. The stars burned eternal. What happens now? Nuri's asked. I don't know, Eli admitted. For the first time in 30 years, I don't have a past to run from. I can just be what? He looked at her and smiled, a real smile, unguarded and full of warmth. Your husband, maybe, if you'll still have me. Nuri's took his scarred hand in hers and kissed it gently. I married a quiet mechanic who fixed things, she said. I found out he was a legend, but the legend isn't what I love. I love the man who makes soup and grows tomatoes and reads poetry. She smiled. That's who I want. That's who I choose. Eli felt something break inside him, something that had been locked away for 3 decades. He pulled Maris close and held her, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt truly at peace. Outside their window, the galaxy turned slowly through the endless night. Wars would come and go, legends would rise and fall, but in that small room on that unremarkable station, at the edge of known space, 2 people had found something more powerful than any weapon, more enduring than any empire. They had found each other, and that was enough.